Let's discuss with former George W. Bush political director Matt Schlapp. He is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, good to see you. Good morning.
Good to be with you, David.
So the tweet, the background of the past few days, the president wants to strengthen our stand on the border. What's driving this now?
Well, I think specifically on the tweet this morning, David, I think what's generally not understood, we use all these terms like DACA in Dreamers. And what's not understood is every day at the border, at the southern border, every week, there are kids that because of what judges have ruled, that when they come to the border, we have to accept them and send them to families, relatives, or to institutions to take care of those kids. There's no vetting of them. Sometimes it's not just the minors that are allowed to be in America. So it's the Department of Health and Human Services pointed out that last month, 3,000 of these people were taken into America. Over the course of the last year, it's almost, or during this year, it's been almost 20,000 people. So we're creating a whole new group of folks who are allowed to come to this country, who are not, going through the legal process of coming into this country. We're a good-hearted nation. We try to accept people that are in desperate circumstances, but we're creating these whole new populations that come into this country, and then we have to face this question of, okay, they're here. Do you give them permanent legal statuses? Do you make them a citizen? And this is a problem that DACA has focused a lot of attention on, but it continues every day.
But we should also point out, you say we're a big-hearted nation. So many of these families, I mean, there's this specter of militarizing the border and that gang members are pouring across, or caravans, as the president talks to them. You have a lot of young people. You have a lot of single mothers. You have a lot of families who are fleeing abusive situations in the countries from which they came.
That's right.
And so you're right. This is a tough issue. But the notion of just pouring military onto the border solves what exactly?
Well, I just don't believe anybody should come into this country unless they go through the same process everyone else has to go through. There should be a process whether or not you're coming here to work temporarily or to get temporary protective status or to be here to be on the path to citizenship. There should be the same process for everybody. And what we've done, because judges have intervened into our immigration laws, is we've created these special categories. And so when you read about this caravan of 1,000 people, I don't know what term you want to describe it as, but people who are coming to the border, even if they're fleeing desperate circumstances or not, they will eventually be able to reside in our country and subvert the normal process. The country can't keep doing that because we have this, it creates great political havoc as people are in this country who then can make the political case, I should get special treatment and I should get amnesty by congressional action. This is the problem. This is why the president says it's not just about DACA. It's about solving these problems that create DACA 2, DACA 3. It's happening every day.
I want to pick up on one point, though, that the president keeps emphasizing, that Democrats stand in the way of the wall. It is a fact that Democrats were willing to do something that seemed really unforeseen, and that is fund the border wall, fund his signature promise. That was part of a deal he could have had, and he walked away. Don't you have to own that as a supporter of the president?
I do, except you know that you've covered the appropriations process forever, including, you didn't go back this far, and I didn't either, but even when Ronald Reagan got his deal for tax cuts with spending cuts, you can't bind future Congresses, David. So the idea that they were going to give money over the course of the next several years and several Congresses to fund the border wall, any future Congress could change that financial arrangement. So that's a tough thing to do. This is why the border wall funding is such a big question. What President Trump actually has to do is he has to get the money in the current Congress. Otherwise, a future Congress can take it away. And as we all know, we have November elections coming up. If there's Democrat majorities in the House and the Senate, are they really going to hold true to an agreement for $25 billion? I don't think so.
Let's talk about tariffs. The president on record again this morning on China, with all this talk of a trade war, with the markets tumbling, he writes this: we are not in a trade war with China. That war was lost many years ago by the foolish or incompetent people who represented the U.S. Now we have a trade deficit of $500 billion a year with intellectual property theft of another $300 billion. We cannot let this continue. You worked for a president who opposed steel and aluminum tariffs. That was unsuccessful. Certainly conservatives, Republicans in the business community and elsewhere are staunchly opposed to the idea of tariffs. You see the potential impact on American farmers, a key part of the Trump political coalition, and you see the impact on the markets of moving forward. Is this a bad course the president's on?
Look, tariffs over the long haul that turn into retaliation from the opposing country are bad for the U.S. consumer. That's the person we should focus on, is does the consumer have options and choices in the marketplace? Do they have to pay more for those options and choices? But in the question about the trade war, the president is absolutely right. The trillions of dollars that the Chinese government have already stolen from American entrepreneurs, we've turned a blind eye toward it. And what the president is saying is we're not going to do that anymore. So he has started this pushback with these tariffs. I hope they go on for a short period of time and China is driven to the table. Actually, I think China's statement with these announcement of retaliatory tariffs is that they haven't actually imposed those tariffs, which is their way of saying if we could all get around the table and resolve this, it would be better for everybody, which is true. But it starts with no more theft of American intellectual property. That must end.
Fair enough. Is the president responsible for the market tumble?
Oh, David, there's all kinds of factors into the market tumble. The one thing there's always true about Wall Street is they don't like the idea of instability. And there's no question that a U.S. president imposing sweeping tariffs on China is new and creates a concern in the marketplace. But here's the real question. What happens over the course of the year? And that's what I'm more focused on is does the Chinese government realize that the American government is serious about this theft from American entrepreneurs and inventors?
Fair enough. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about Russia.
Sure.
In the broadest sense, not the investigation, but the actual act of Russia seeking to manipulate the 2016 election. The president's national security advisor, General McMaster, who is on his way out, as we know, was very critical of the Russians and the response. Listen to this.
Russia brazenly and implausibly denies its actions, and we have failed to impose sufficient costs. We are acting, but we must recognize the need for all of us to do more to respond to and deter Russian aggression.
That's pretty tough language. We have failed to impose sufficient costs in response to Russia's actions in the 2016 election. This is the president's national security advisor, someone with a sterling reputation in the national security establishment. That's criticism of the president, is it not?
I think it's criticism over the fact that Russia has been involved in our elections, as Mike Pompeo and others have said, not just in 2016, but in previous elections. And there's a lot of blame to go towards the Obama administration, too, who clearly did not keep our election process sacred and keep it from being tampered by the Russians, even though they knew that it was happening as well. So I think there's a lot of blame to go along. I applaud that the Trump administration, especially in the last weeks or months, have taken quite aggressive acts against the Russian government, more aggressive than President Obama ever thought about. And I think that's a good step in the right direction. I think the key here with Russia is to know that President views our ultimate adversary in all these questions as China. And the focus on the president is to make sure that we don't lose track of our #1 menace overseas, and it's China. But that doesn't mean that Russia